Hi everyone, it's Kristen. So this video is for Sunday Monday, and I wore this shirt because I don't think I've worn it yet, or if I have worn it, it's been a while because I don't remember wearing it. So anyway, so for Saturday, Sunday, it's Aries because they combine the images for Saturday, Sunday, and then for Monday is Ghost Rider, which I believe we've had either a stat card or a stamp of him, or maybe both. I mean, it's which I can hardly believe this. It's 6 months into the year already, so I've already been doing this for 6 months. So forgive me if I can't remember like every single thing. I know we've talked about him before. I just can't remember in like what capacity. It could be both. So it says for this, when Johnny Blaze becomes a Ghost Rider, he gains control over a near indestructible Hellfire cycle. He is a world class champion cyclist capable of seemingly impossible stunts, because of course he's a stunt double, um, as well as excellent shot with shotguns and pistols, and has knowledge of the occult. So, and then for um, the stamp for Sunday, Monday, it is. I have to be, and it's sad because I have to be careful with this because it's falling apart now, which I was hoping to keep it together, but it's falling apart. So, is Zemo, and this actually is Baron Zemo's father. He first appeared in, I don't know, I can't remember, but I remember him dying in Avengers 15 after he had formed his own, Masters of Evil with Enchantress, Scourge the Executioner, Radioactive Man, and I can't remember who else. But of course, he went against the Avengers and he failed. He accidentally used his laser gun, and the glare from the Captain America's shield blinded him, and so he accidentally hit a bunch of rocks in a mountain and caused a rock slide and killed himself basically. Just pretty sad. And yeah, so that's who that is, and you can find this stamp in Defenders number 13, May 74. Stamp also appears in Fear number 23, August of 74, and Supernatural Thrillers number 11, February of 75. And the stamp actually comes from Tales of Suspense number 99, March of 68. Okay, so that means that this actually isn't Zemo. It's his pilot sidekick, like Franz or something, pretending to be Zemo. Like he even went as far as invading Wakanda as Zemo. Like obviously Zemo died, but he pretended like he hadn't died, and so he, invaded Wakanda pretending to be Zemo, like trying to carry on his legacy. So there you go. And it's interesting because you can see Zemo is all one color in this comic. You can see Captain America and Black Panther there. And for the stamp, they actually differentiated the colors so that he'd stand out more. So, I mean, granted, yeah, like I said, this is Zemo's father and then his sidekick. And Zemo, like the Baron Zemo that we know, or that most people know, he actually appeared in Captain America 168, 1973. So this also might have been maybe trying to get people interested about this new character that they had introduced, this new Zemo. But when he was first introduced, though, he went by the codename Phoenix, and he was trying to get revenge against Captain America for the death of his father. And his father, he was really smart, like a genius, and he invented this almost indissolvable adhesive that he called Adhesive X, and he accidentally fell into a boiling vat of this adhesive, and his hood mask that he wore was permanently attached to his face. because of that. Yeah. So his son, who we're going to call Baron Zemo, because he's like the 12th in line, the 13th Baron Zemo. Yeah, his dad was the 12th, he's the 13th. So he had the code name of Phoenix, and like I said, he went after Captain America to get revenge for the death of his father. So he resurfaced and joined up with Aram Zola, the guy who's like super smart with computers, and he has the robot body, and then his face, like the computer face, which always reminds me of that villain from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the pink guy who has the robot body, and then his brain, him, is in that little container. That's who he always reminds me of. Oh goodness. Okay, and then so resurfaced with him. Actually was tutored by Red Skull and his daughter Sin, who weirdly enough like went by Mother Superior, which I get the superior part, but the mother part, it's kind of weird. He took after his dad in a lot of ways, and formed the fourth Masters of Evil, and he was obsessed with his dad. Like, he loved his dad so much, and he was so upset that, his dad died. That's why he went after Captain America, and he went after the Bloodstone in order to resurrect his father. But all the Bloodstone did was actually make his father's body a vessel for all the, like, dark spirits that existed in the Bloodstone. And it just, like, reanimated his body and used it as a vessel, and I feel like that was that thing. His dad was killed by crossbones. I'm pretty sure it's crossbones. Anyway, he even like was so obsessed that when the Bloodstone like fell into an active volcano, he went in after it and like totally burned up and destroyed one of his hands trying to get it back. He was basically a very like broken, defeated man. I mean, he kind of just witnessed his father dying, and his father died again, and like I said, he was super obsessed with his father. Not obsessed, but like he loved his father dearly, and his father had loved him, and so he was just really trying to bring him back. The Baroness, she was calling herself the Baroness, and she actually modeled herself after Baron Zemo's dad, found him, and she kind of took him in, and they became this weird family, and they kidnapped abused children to serve as their children, which you'd think, oh, well, that's not so bad, because they kidnapped, these kids that were abused. I mean, they should have been taken out of that situation anyway and taken care of them. They, unfortunately, though, were still sentenced to prison for kidnapping. And, but it's weird because, like, during this time period when they're married and they have these kids, Superia, this crazy female villain, comes along, and then she and the Baroness turn against Baron Zemo. And Superia, she oh goodness, comic books. Her plan is to sterilize basically everybody and just have her and her small, female army that were still able to reproduce, so that her like reproductive capabilities would be worth like a fortune. Yeah. Like I said, comic books. So they turned against him, and he turned against them, kind of in turn. And like I said, went to prison. He escaped. The Baroness died shortly before she actually had to go to prison. So, he tried to, again, get revenge on Captain America. He himself fell into a vat of boiling adhesive X, and same thing happened to him that happened to his dad. His mask got glued to his face. Oh, and Captain America at one point said, we have a cure for that. We have, we came up with something that can dissolve this, nearly indissoluble adhesive that your dad came up with." And that just made Baron Zemo even madder because Captain America never shared this with his dad. Like, his dad had to live, with his hood over his face, attached to his face, for the rest, like, from that point on. So that just made him even hold even more of a grudge against Captain America. And around the kids, like, he wore a mask because his face was totally scarred and, like, it kind of looked like melted, like, wax or something. Yeah, it was, not good. He wore some, like, a face mask that made his face look human and normal around the kids because, of course, he didn't want to scare the kids. Okay. The reason you guys may know Baron Zemo best is from Thunderbolts. So this was a story in the 90s, the late 90s, 97. And I will say it happened after Onslaught. When I read that, and I couldn't find my first issue. I don't know why. This is issue 4. I don't know what happened to, like, my first 3 issues. I need to reorganize my comic books. They're kind of a mess. So, but anyway, I'm off topic again. So this happened after Onslaught. All the heroes disappeared, Fantastic Four, Avengers, and he, formed the new Masters of Evil, and he heard Goliath. This is not like Ant-Man Goliath. This is like a different Goliath, like Eric Johnson, I think his name is. That could be wrong. Anyway, and he had, same powers, like, as Ant-Man, as Goliath, could make himself grow and, stronger and etc. So, and Goliath was talking to Beetle, sorry, momentary lapse. So anyway, the purpose of forming the new Masters of Evil was in order to get Goliath out of the prison, the Microverse prison, and he overheard Goliath and Beetle talking, to each other, and we're saying, well, I wonder who's going to fill that void now that the Avengers and Fantastic Four and all these other heroes have disappeared, are gone, are dead. And Baron Zemo came up with this brilliant idea, and I honestly thought this was a brilliant idea because this really hadn't been done in comics before, which is kind of crazy to think about. He introduced this new team of heroes, the Thunderbolts. And like the tagline is like justice like lightning, Thunderbolts. So anyway, like sorry, that was weird. The screen kind of went black for a second. So he introduced them to, like, here they all are, He introduced them to everyone and, they're heroes, but really they were the masters of evil, and this was part of his plot to take over the world, to gain people's trust. So he posed as Citizen V, and then we have Beetle as Mach 1, and here's Moonstone, and here's Screaming Mimi, Songbird. Oh, she was in one of the Dazzler comics recently. She was in that. She was part of the wrestling group, and that Dazzler met in prison. I'll link that in the comments because that's a pretty interesting comic about women wrestlers. And then we have Goliath, and then we have Fixer, who's actually Techno, and Goliath is Atlas. And for some reason, I can't remember Moonstone's dual identity. Anyway, and this is a new member that she just kind of invited herself to join the Thunderbolts and Jolt. And what happened is Citizen V, Baron Zemo, wasn't going to let her join because then, she might find out their secret, that they're actually the Masters of Evil. But Moonstone convinced him, oh, you should let her join because what would be the reason for the public, to tell the public, oh, she can't join. So anyway, she was kind of part of the turning point of the Thunderbolts where a lot of them decided, especially Songbird and Mach 1 decided they liked being heroes and they wanted to continue being heroes. So, but yeah, the first issue, I remember turning to the last page and my jaw dropping because I was like, holy cow, I did not see that coming. When, Baron Zemo was like, yes, my masters of evil, our plan is working perfectly, and then he introduced them as their, masters of evil identities. And I was like, holy cow. So, and what is also messed up is that since they liked being heroes, Baron Zemo decided he was losing control of them. So he decided to out them to everyone. He decided to announce to everyone that the Thunderbolts were actually the masters of evil, and he, named off everyone's identities. And they felt like they had no choice, and so they had to go with him, and he took over the world through mind control, and it actually did work. But they ended up turning against him, and so his plan failed. But, like I said, it was a crazy, crazy story. Let's see. Oh, Meteorite. That's who Moonstone is. See, because, I also found this. This is, to introduce the new Thunderbolt series, and it catches you up, from, issue 2021 that Wizard, just put out. And so the Thunderbolts, it's kind of was their redemption saga. They were trying to redeem themselves in the public's eye, trying to, show that, no, they really were heroes. They weren't really just pretending, maybe in the very, very beginning, but then they really were heroes. So, anyway, Baron Zemo, he lost his team. He was killed by Scourge, the Executioner. And his mind, because Techno, Fixer still stayed very loyal to Baron Zemo. And Goliath, Atlas actually helped him escape because he felt like he owed him. But then he decided he did really want to be a hero. So, but Fixer, he's always a bad guy. He's always been a bad guy. He never changed that. So he actually put his mind in the coma, the comatose body of John Watkins III. And it's ironic because this is actually a descendant or a pupil or something of the original Citizen V. So here was Baron Zemo pretending to be Citizen V, and he was actually put in the body of Citizen V, and he used, this body and this persona of Citizen V to basically try to take down the Thunderbolts, and especially Hawkeye, because Hawkeye decided that, or offered his services as leader of the team to the Thunderbolts, kind of in a way to help them, the public, see that they had been redeemed. Because Hawkeye's way of thinking was, hey, I started out kind of misguided as a criminal, and I got a second chance. I want to give that to them. So he went after the Thunderbolts in this disguise. But then Fixer put his mind actually in the body of his Baron Zemo counterpart, Earth persona. I think his name was Iron Cross. Something to do with iron. Anyway, and he, kind of formed his own Thunderbolts on that world. And this, I believe, was the Counter-Earth that the heroes disappeared to after Onslaught supposedly killed them. So then, of course, he made it back to, the original Earth, 616 Earth. And he tried to take over the world again because he thought he was the only one that could save the Earth, which is, still pretty misguided. But, a lot of villains, they have seemingly kind of good reasons for what they're doing. Or, if you kind of look at it sideways, you're like, okay, I mean, that kind of makes sense. But they're going about it, all wrong. Like Magneto just wants to protect his people, but goes about it totally wrong way. Thanos, well, at least movie Thanos, he wanted to lessen the burden for the population and for Earth, so he got rid of half the people. Oh, anyway, so yeah, sometimes villains have, they're not straight up like villains. They have a kind of a method to their madness, so to speak, but it's still not the right way to do things at all. So at one point, after, he had tried to take over the world and failed, he stole Moonstone's gems, which they're like alien gems, which give her these powers, and he kind of mastered how to use them. And apparently using them allowed him to time travel and travel to other dimensions. And so he kind of formed his own Thunderbolts using like past incarnations and Thunderbolts from different dimensions and that all that sorts of things. And he like had this structure, a castle, and I want to say it was like called Folding Castle, which seems so weird, but I think it was because they named it that because there was all these portals in it, and all these portals could take you to different places on Earth and different like dimensions and stuff. It was kind of cool. Like it was a cool base. And then when Civil War happened for the first time, it was kind of weird because he sided with Captain America. Like Iron Man asked him to kind of recruit villains to his side, which he kind of was already doing, but he reached out to Captain America and gave him this key to this prison that they were building and said, hey, this key will get you out of the prison. Because he realized the only way that he could actually like become superior was through being like righteous like Captain America. Like he kind of started to like look up to Captain America actually, which is kind of crazy in itself. But again, he's a villain, like he's misguided, and so Grandmaster had this like wellspring of power and he stole it and he was going to use it to, save the world, but even doing so would, could cause dire consequences. Like it wasn't worth it. Like you can't use it to save the world when it could destroy the world. And he had seen kind of a future where Songbird would betray him, but she had lost her powers, so he's like, you can't betray me. This is the moment where you would have betrayed me. And she like hits this operatic note that shatters the Moonstone gems. So she didn't even need her powers to defeat him, which was pretty cool. And by shattering the gems, he was like sucked into this like dimensional cloud vortex portal, whatever thing you call it. I don't know what you call it, but one of those things. And so, and it's okay. I didn't read this, to be honest. I mean, there was like a mini series where he, because he'd been sucked through the portal, he went and visited all of his relatives like all through time. I think starting in like the 16th century. I can't remember exactly when. Like I said, I didn't read it. I know something I didn't read, but I mean, there's plenty of that probably. But, well, there definitely is. I mean, I definitely have not read everything comic related. I mean, no. But I know, I mean, like I said, I know enough to give, a basic overview of most things. So he comes back, and it's weird because he's like all jealous of Bucky, who went from being the Winter Soldier to Captain America. And he's jealous of Bucky and like kidnaps him at one point because Captain America, even though Bucky has done all these horrible things as the Winter Soldier, Captain America and all these people around him have forgiven him like with no problem. Like, oh, you're forgiven. No big deal. You blew up a huge part of New York and killed dozens of SHIELD agents. Oh, it's okay. It's, we forgive you. That wasn't really you. We understand. And he just couldn't understand how, sorry, I used understand like twice, really close together. He didn't understand why they would forgive him so readily and so just, without question. So he leaked information about Bucky's activities as he was the Winter Soldier, while he was the Winter Soldier, and he also implanted like nanites in him to make him act crazy, attacking police officers and all that sort of thing, so that the public would start to distrust him and even like hate him. Because, like I said, he was super jealous of him. So, I get it. And then he turned his attention again to Hawkeye because he still was mad at him for taking over his team. And then we have this weird story, which was kind of cool, though. You have this story of Pleasant Hill and this nice gated community, and you have Jim, this man who can't really remember who he is, but he's a nice guy. He's just kind of wandering around. This is where he lives. And he meets this guy Phil one day, and Phil has apparently invented a device that will remind him of who he was. And apparently the weird thing is that Shield had gotten a hold of, they've like, from the Cosmic Cube, they made this like reality warping kind of technology where Pleasant Hill, all the residents of Pleasant Hill were former villains who had forgotten who they were, and they're just like normal everyday citizens that live in this gated community now, which is kind of crazy, but kind of an interesting story, really. So yeah, all these villains lived in this community, and Phil, who is actually Fixer, who is like a mechanical genius and can invent all kinds of things, he invented the device to turn them all back. Like, I don't even know how he knew. I can't remember how he knew that there was something wrong, but he knew there was something wrong, and so he invented this device and turned all the villains back into who they were. And so Baron Zemo used that opportunity to recruit all these villains that escaped from Pleasant Hill. So, yeah. And there was also, where, because of the reality warping technology, whatever, Cosmic Cube stuff, Steve thought he was a Hydra double agent, which I didn't like that storyline, but, I mean, it was different. I get it. They're always looking for different new things, but I didn't like it. But anyway, he thinks and kind of convinces Baron Zemo that they're like best friends, and he should come with him on this mission to kill Red Skull. And so Steve he does kill like the clone of Red Skull, because it's not really Red Skull. And so like I said, I didn't like that story. It wasn't that good. And I feel like the latest thing was the whole like one world under Doom. He opposed Doom, Baron Zemo did, and like went to Latveria and invaded it with like Hydra agents or something. And Doom just kills him and replaces him with a Doom bot. And at first, people don't really notice, and then they start to notice. So, like, I'm sure he'll be back at some point, because, no one really stays dead. But yeah, it's fun not fun, but I say interesting too much, so I need to come up with more words. But it's interesting how, it's technically his dad / his right-hand man who have the stamp in this stamp series, even though he was introduced, in like 1973. So like I said, it could have been a method to try to garner, more attention to them introducing, the son, as well, that for the reason why they included this stamp. So anyway, that ran, of course, way longer than I thought it would, because there was a lot to talk about him. He has a really interesting backstory. Pretty, like I said, Thunderbolts. That was one of my favorite non-X-Men stories, like, ever. I'm just going to throw that out there, because like I said, I was shocked. Like I said, 1997, read it and was like, what did I just read? Because I was not expecting that at all. So, yeah, like I said, one of my favorite stories. So I might do a video where I focus on one of these issues in the future, just because it's such a fun topic to talk about, even though I just talked about it here. Anyway, so we'll see. I mean, definitely in the future, not anytime soon, since I just talked about it. So anyway, I hope you will join me for the future for more videos. Like, subscribe, share. I appreciate any support that you want to give me. If you like cat videos, I have the stray cat saga going on in my like shorts section. I'm trying to. It's been like 7 months, 7 or 8 months. I can't remember exactly when Longshot first started visiting me, but I'm trying to make Longshot and Warren, who came a couple months later. I'm trying to make them my friends. Um, so you'll see that saga if you like cats. You should watch that. So until next time, bye.